Americans have been given little evidence to support the deadly boat strikes, which may be in violation of U.S. law.
Yeah, and some wonder why the country is taking such bold action when a widely successful Coast Guard program has interdicted at least 1,000 drug boats without any killings, but with major arrests and prosecutions.
Let's learn more from retired Coast Guard Admiral William Baumgartner. He was the Guard's operational commander for the Southeastern Caribbean, and prior to that, its chief counsel. He's also with the National Security Leaders for America, a bipartisan group looking at NatSec issues. So good to have you with us. Thanks so much for being here this morning.
Well, thanks for having me on.
So before we get into the very quickly escalating situation in the Caribbean, can you explain why a program like Hit Run, this Coast Guard program, is likely more effective than deadly strikes on suspected drug boats? So fill us in on the program, how it works, and why you think it might be a better option.
Okay, well, briefly, what Hit Run is helicopters that are deployed largely from Coast Guard cutters or Navy ships that have snipers basically on them. And when you intercept a go-fast or smaller drug smuggling vessel, they are trained to use warning shots to try to stop the vessel and then shoot out the engines. That puts the boat still in the water, can't move while the ship comes in and intercepts. You intercept, you arrest the people on board, you have evidence, you bring them back to the United States for prosecution, and then you mine them for intelligence that leads to more information and to more interdictions of other drug smuggling vessels. So that's a particular technique that's worked over the years. And it's not just the Coast Guard by itself. The whole of government participates in detection and monitoring. And more importantly, there are many countries around the world that also participate in the intelligence, sharing information, and have developed a legal framework so that this technique can be used on vessels of many different suspected nationalities and many different locations, not just U.S. vessels or in U.S. waters.
What is lost by doing it the way the White House is currently, by simply saying these are alleged narco-terrorist boats, we're just going to blow them out of the water and let that be that?
Well, first of all, you lose any evidence of what they were actually doing. You also lose the intelligence you would get from the people that are arrested. Probably more importantly, you lose legitimacy. When you use deadly force, you need to be very careful that you have a clear basis for it, that you've tried every other possibility to address the problem, and that you have the backing of your international partners before you use deadly force. Hit Run does use deadly force, and I'll correct you just a little bit. There have been a couple people injured and a couple deaths in that process in the 25 years Hit Run has been in process, but they've all been accidents. They've been people hiding where we couldn't see them and were accidentally injured in the process. That's very different than setting out to kill everyone in the vessel and destroy the evidence and basically not know what's really happening.
And of course, the administration has given us little evidence. They really haven't explained how they know who these people allegedly are. But from your experience, when you look at video of these fast boats and the people in them, is your assessment different than that in the Pentagon?
Well, certainly looking at the first one, with 11 people in that Go Fast boat, that is never going to be a serious cocaine smuggling load. It just doesn't happen. Usually you're looking at 2, 3, 4 people because you want space for cocaine. If you're trying to get cocaine up to the United States, your goal is to put as much cocaine on that boat as possible and get it to an intermediate destination, usually in Central America, so that it can be taken by land to the US. You're not going to put 11 people on a Go Fast boat if you're serious about smuggling cocaine to the United States. Often smaller amounts of cocaine may go on a boat that's doing general smuggling, mostly smuggling people from island to island. And if you had 11 people on that boat, that's in my opinion, much more likely that most of those people were migrants, passengers. Maybe there was cocaine on board that vessel. It wasn't going to be a lot of cocaine. But especially if it was headed towards the Windward Islands, those are usually local stops for moving people, moving small amounts of drugs to satisfy the market in that area, or perhaps to get small amounts smuggled over to Europe. That's not serious smuggling to the United States. And it's cocaine anyway. There's never going to be anything other than cocaine as a drug coming up from South America.
Admiral, one of the things that we're hearing from the White House is these narco-terrorists and the drugs that they're carrying present a clear and sort of present danger to the United States, and that's why the administration is allowed to act upon them without having to sort of go to Congress. From a legal standpoint, does that reasoning make sense to you, and is there any sort of danger for the men and women who are carrying out these strikes that they could potentially be breaking the law?
Well, legally, saying something presents a clear and present danger doesn't quite do it. You need to show under international law that you are facing an imminent threat of actual attack. And you're also in an area that we call the law of armed conflict. And armed conflict has a meaning. We are not in a situation here where drug traffickers are going into the United States with arms trying to harm U.S. citizens. And in fact, there's a good argument that that's the last thing that they would want to do, well, other than lose money, but they don't want to harm their customers. They're willing to accept that a lot of them may die in the process, but it isn't their intent to kill their customers. So there are some problems in looking at this under the law of armed conflict and looking for a basis there. If you're looking under normal criminal law, you can only use the force that's necessary to compel compliance for somebody that you think you have jurisdiction over. And on these videos, we've seen vessels turning around. We've seen vessels stopping when they see that they're detected. We also saw a vessel of what's called a self-propelled semi-submersible. They call them drug submarines, but they're not really drug submarines. They move slowly. They're easy to intercept once you detect them. So to justify on a law enforcement scheme that you had to use a missile or a bomb to blow them up, and you had no choice but to do that, just doesn't pay. It just doesn't work.
So, of course, you seem to be suggesting that this is literally overkill by the administration. What's the risk to our allies in the region and to the reputation of the United States if you think that this is perhaps, ill carried out?
Well, I think there are a couple areas where there's a risk. First, look at the claim that this trade coming from Venezuela in particular is killing many U.S. citizens because of the current overdose crisis doesn't really pan out either. Fentanyl is the drug that is causing 75 to 80% of the overdose deaths in the United States. That drug is not coming from Venezuela or South America. None of these boats are carrying that drug. They're carrying cocaine. And cocaine, we have had an increase in cocaine deaths, but 80% of cocaine deaths are associated with fentanyl or other opioids. So the claim that there is a clear and present danger, especially in terms of death of U.S. citizens from cocaine coming from these countries is very difficult. Plus, Venezuela is not a major cocaine pathway, certainly not compared to Colombia or Ecuador or others. Now, so when you have a difficult factual basis for your claim and a dubious, if any, legal basis for your course of action, what this does to your allies is it really makes them nervous. It alienates them. They don't want to cooperate in a process that looks like it's not factually correct, that it is legally lacking, to be polite. That's not what they or their citizens want to be involved with. So we lose them. And we have, which is sad because we've relied upon those allies for decades to help us with intelligence, trafficking patterns, and even ships and aircraft. We've traditionally had British, Canadian, Dutch, Belgian, and other nations cooperating in the Caribbean and even working under our military control to help with the cocaine problem coming out of South America. Those allies are going to go look elsewhere. They're going to look at the agreements that they've signed with us and say, this isn't part of our agreement on how we deal with this problem.
All right, retired Coast Guard Admiral William Baumgartner. So thankful for your analysis this morning. We really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.